The return. It began as a small domestic scene, a house that once knew laughter now learning, painfully, how to laugh again. After a season of lies and betrayal engineered by a woman named Trang, CEO James had finally undone the worst of it. He had found deep, explained the falsehoods, and by sheer persistence repaired what the rumor and manipulation had torn apart. Their reunion, the fragile, incandescent moment when two people who had been pushed apart by malice chose to come back together, set the episode's tone. Love had returned, but danger had not yet been silenced. What followed was not a romance insulated from consequence, but the reassembly of a family under a slow and gathering pressure. James's mother, a figure who had once regarded Deep with reserve, let that reserve dissolve. In her eyes, Deep transformed from a figure of suspicion to the daughter-in-law she had always wanted, gentle, selfless, and fiercely protective of her small son. If this were a human interest piece, the headline might have read, "Rivalries End, Family Heals." But beneath the surface, a darker story continued to unfold, one driven by obsession rather than reason. The soft settlement before the storm. The reconciliation scene is simple and domestic. Windows open to a late morning light, a kettle steaming on the stove, a child's toy abandoned on the rug. James squeezes Deep's hand. His mother, who had once presided over the house like an austere monarch, now speaks in a gentler key. She announces, disarmingly, that she is ready to step down and hand the company to her son. Her decision is both personal and performative. It acknowledges time and mortality. "I am getting old," she says, but it is also a deliberate transfer of stewardship. For James, the offer is both recognition and moment of existential shift. The battlefield of corporate strategy gives way, for the first time, to the politics of family. In that room, past wounds mend enough to allow a future to be planned. There is a second, more surprising gesture. The matriarch takes Deep's hand and offers her a place in the company, to start as James's secretary and, in time, to govern side by side with him. For Deep, who had been scorned and misunderstood, the appointment is not merely a job, it is a public vindication. It is a soft coronation. The small household brightens. For a few scenes, the narrative breathes. James, once a man of tactical calm and ruthless efficiency, is humanized by gratitude, and the camera of the mind lingers on quiet domesticity. The grandmother with the baby in her lap, the couple stepping up the stairs together, Deep pressing a hand to the house's front door like someone recognizing home for the first time. These moments do more than restore balance. They reveal what Trang hates most. It is not James's success. It is the family itself, a living, ordinary intimacy that invalidates her claims and claims on him. If James's quiet contentment is a rebuke, Trang receives it like a wound that will not heal. Trang's mask. Remorse as a trap. Trang's public face shifts. Gone is the open antagonism, in its place a studied humility. She arrives at the house bearing a basket of fruit and a practiced smile. Her voice is soft with contrition. She says the right things: apologies, regret, a promise to leave, to study abroad, to remove herself from the orbit of the family she has tormented. It's an old theater trick, and it works. James is cautious but polite. His mother, softened by recent events, accepts Trang's apology with a wary kindness. Deep, trusting by nature and tender toward a child whose needs have simplified the world into immediate care, accepts the gift in good faith. She slices the fruit, thinking of the baby's nutrition and the superstitions that bind new mothers to foods said to improve lactation. The family shares the snack like any family might, a simple ritual of trust, but the fruit is a staged prop. Behind the smile is calculation. Behind the study abroad story is desperation. Trang's family is bankrupt, and her future, in her eyes, depends on bringing James back into her life by whatever means necessary. The lie of going away is a ruse designed to lower defenses. She hires someone to follow Deep, to learn her patterns, the child's pickup schedule, the rhythms of the household. The care with which she plans is almost clinical. Her jealousy, once petty, has metastasized into a logic of elimination. If the mother and child are gone, the man will, in her calculation, return. This is where the story stops being a romance and becomes an interrogation of motives. Trang's actions are not simply vindictive, they are strategic. She frames herself as a believer in destiny while systematically arranging the means to control it. The poisoned fruit. How trust becomes a crime. There is an economy of cruelty in Trang's plan. She selects a toxin that is tasteless and odorless so that suspicion will not be immediate. She chooses fruit, a benign and nurturing symbol, to weaponize the family's routine. That night, after an ordinary dinner, Deep feels a wave of pain. At first she assumes exhaustion. Late nights, the demands of a newborn, the fragile aftershocks of childbirth. But the pain quickly becomes something else, violent, incapacitating. James, stepping from the shower, becomes the reluctant witness to an unfolding nightmare. Deep collapses. The baby, minutes later, begins to convulse. The urgency is immediate and absolute. James becomes a man in motion, running through city streets with his child in his arms and the woman he loves held like a fragile truth. He runs red lights, ignores honks, and races to the hospital as if the speed could outrun consequence. In the emergency room, the scene becomes methodical brutality. 2 cases are admitted simultaneously, a postpartum mother and an infant who is not yet a year old. Doctors and nurses move in coordinated chaos. The baby's condition stabilizes first. The medical team diagnoses mild poisoning likely transferred through breast milk. The baby's survival is a narrow mercy. The child's young physiology, combined with rapid medical intervention, prevents yet another tragedy. Deep's prognosis is worse. She has an underlying heart condition, and the toxin's aggressiveness outpaces the neutralizing measures the doctors can deploy. The drama centers on a paradox. A simple act of domestic trust, sharing fruit, becomes the mechanism that imperils not one life, but two. The hospital vigil, prayer, science, and a small miracle. The hospital becomes a theater of waiting. James sits outside the operating room like a man stripped of strategy, his composure dissolved into raw grief. We see him, once a CEO comfortable with numbers and control, reduced to a father with blood on his knuckles from clenching his fists. His vulnerability is stark. He prays, he pleads. He becomes an emblem of the episode's moral core. Love, when stripped of performance, becomes small acts of desperation. Inside, Deep hovers between consciousnesses. She understands the contours of what is happening. She recognizes the faces of the medical staff, hears the rhythm of machines, and in that pocket of lucidity we follow her thoughts. They are not sermons about death but small, human regrets. I won't see my son toddle. I won't grow old with him. I'm sorry to James for leaving early. The dignity of her acceptance complicates the viewer's moral map. She is neither saint nor martyr but a woman full of fear, flawed and brave. Then, improbably, Deep stabilizes. Day by day her vitals improve. The physician's language shifts from grim to incredulous. This level of recovery, a doctor admits to James, is almost unheard of. Medicine, faith, and the family's prayers meet at an unanticipated place that resembles a miracle, though the medical staff will call it an unusually strong response to treatment. The baby, once limp, becomes alert. The family is discharged after more than a month. The small house on the hill re-illumines with a light that is less theatrical than earned. The aftermath. Gratitude and the cold question. Homecoming is a scene meant to be held in slow focus. James lifts Deep to the house steps, kisses her brow, and says, "We made it through." You'll never have to fight alone again. The grandmother, the woman who passed the business baton, holds the infant like a talisman and sheds tears that are both relief and regret. The house seems to breathe out. Happiness, however, is tempered by unease. James, who has built an empire on parsing risk, cannot let certain irregularities pass. The family had eaten only the fruit provided by Trang. Both mother and child were poisoned. The correlation is clear but the motive must be proven. So James gives an instruction in the low key of someone returning to an old skill set: investigate. He asks his most trusted aide for a full inquiry, every person who entered the house that day, every dish, every word spoken. The move is quiet but decisive. He is no longer just a husband, he is the investigator of his own life. Trang's reaction to the failure of her plan is visceral. When she learns that Deep and the child survived, she smashes a mirror in a fit of rage. Her psychodrama, a portrait of someone cornered and unmoored, is frightening in its predictability. For her, the world rearranges into a simple equation: absence of the rival equals the return of the prize. It is a violent, possessive calculus. And because she has already breached the boundaries of moral restraint once, the suggestion that she might do so again is not just plausible but expected. Anatomy of a villain, desperation, design, and the performance of innocence. Trang is written, and writes herself, from a place of practical desperation. Her family's bankruptcy is not background, it is the engine of her plan. The study abroad tale is an expensive lie, a public performance that masks the private truth of debt and calculated survival. If the audience has a sympathetic reading to make, we must resist it. Motivations are not excuses. Hunger and fear do not become authorization for poisoning. Yet the dramatic complexity of Trang's character comes from the way she uses social performance, apologies, gifts, melodramatic humility, as a weapon. She understands reputation as currency and manipulates it. The episode forces the viewer to recognize just how easily social niceties, a fruit offered with a smile, an apology whispered over tea, can be weaponized by someone with a plan and the capacity for self-deception. This is where the drama converges with a more journalistic reflection: how ordinary rituals of trust, when co-opted by a determined personality, can become sites of violence. The fruit here is not merely a prop, it is a symbol of how domestic life can be infiltrated, the private made lethal. The investigation, quiet strategies and the promise of retribution. James's response to the crime is strategically quiet. He does not announce a vendetta, he orders a methodical inquiry. He tasks his aide with a checklist. Who visited the house that day? From where did the fruit arrive? What are the contacts connected to Trang, who was following Deep's routines? He consults forensics. He constructs timelines. This is not merely about retribution, it is about preventing recurrence. The investigation scenes are procedural and deliberately unromantic. Interviews in terse office rooms, whiteboards of names and times, cell phone logs scoured for location pings. James's public authority, the CEO who commands boardrooms and quarterly reports, becomes private authority, a man who knows how to marshal resources to protect what he loves. In those scenes we watch competence become tenderness. Meanwhile, Trang's spiral accelerates. She smashes mirrors and screams into empty rooms, but she also takes quieter measures: more surveillance, renewed contact with the underworld figures she had hired, attempts to bribe or coerce new allies. The moral of this stretch is uncomfortable. When someone has already broken social taboos and caused harm, the likelihood they will do so again increases. The arc is not melodramatic for its violence alone, it is chilling for its ordinariness. People can lie and hurt for reasons that feel painfully rational to them. Ethics, faith, and the emotional currency of forgiveness. The episode asks the audience to reconcile two competing thoughts. On one hand, forgiveness and family redemption have propelled the narrative forward. Deep chooses, ultimately, to stay, to forgive James for whatever he may have been accused of and to accept her place in the family. Her mother-in-law's offer of reconciliation and professional integration is a moral reward for endurance. On the other hand, the story refuses to reduce consequences to a tidy lesson. The villains here are not given easy redemption arcs. Trang's malice is not explained away by poverty or loneliness. Instead, it is examined as a destructive logic born from a mixture of entitlement and fear. The drama is careful not to lavish pity on the perpetrator. It insists upon a rigorous moral accounting. The show positions forgiveness as a choice the victims may make, not an obligation they owe. This tension is what gives the episode its ethical bite. Viewers are invited to admire Deep's resilience and James's devotion, but also to be uneasy about societal structures that create for some people a belief that they can seize what they want at any cost. The small joys of family life, the baby's laugh, the mother's kindness, become precious against this backdrop precisely because they are vulnerable. Scene studies, moments that shape a long night. To understand the emotional architecture of the episode, it helps to linger on short, crystalline scenes. The apology that wasn't. Trang's face as she says, "I was wrong." Her hands carefully placed over the fruit basket. The viewer is invited to read the subtext. Contrition is strategy. The slice. Deep in the kitchen, washing and cutting the fruit with the mechanical rhythm of maternal dutifulness. Small domestic acts become dramatic fulcrums. The collapse. Deep gripping the counter, her face gone white. James emerging from the shower and finding her on the floor. A brutal interlude that suddenly turns the private into the public. The sprint, the car, red lights, the city flying by as James carries his child and his hope. Speed is a metaphor for impotence and for the limits of power when facing certain kinds of injury. The hallway. James collapsed, cradling his son after hearing the baby's condition stabilized. The camera, or the narrative voice, holds the stillness of a man whose usual language, control, has been stripped away. The chapel scene. Two people kneel in a small chapel, palms pressed together. The organ hums. Even Christians and those of other faiths will recognize the universal grammar of prayer here, a surrender of agency and an appeal to something larger. The recovery. Gradual. Not cinematic with a single dramatic headlift, but slow and credible. A day of better vitals, another day of appetite, a nurse's smile that grows less forced. These vignettes are the episode's atoms. Put together, they create a narrative molecule with weight and moral complexity. Character portraits. James, an archetype in transition, hard-nosed CEO and reinvented husband. He is not saved from himself but is softened by responsibility. The episode allows us to see a productive tension. His command abilities in business are now applied to family protection, and they are just as effective when marshaled with tenderness. What makes him compelling is his contradiction. He is a strategist who will sprint to the hospital because strategy has its limits. Deep. Not a passive victim. She is kind, trusting, and flawed. Her choices come from love, not from martyrdom. Her near-death experience reframes her as a figure who understands the cost of survival and chooses family anyway. In the reconstruction of the family, she becomes the quiet center. James's mother, a woman of power who discovers that legacy means more than balance sheets. She hands over the company with a suddenness that is both humane and strategic. She trusts in continuity, not mere bloodline. Her conversion from reserved to appreciative muddies her earlier judgments and makes her a more generous figure. Trang, the antagonist whose reasoning is as logical as it is grotesque. Bankruptcy and social ambition are her material realities, but her choice to weaponize trust marks an ethical collapse. She is neither cartoon villain nor tragic figure. She is humanly credulous in her own narrative and therefore dangerous. Thematic reflections. Several themes run through the fabric of the episode. Trust versus performance. The episode continually interrogates the difference between what people say and what they mean. Trang's apology is performance, Deep's acceptance is trust. The consequences of confusing the two become catastrophic. Power and vulnerability. James's power is both public, corporate, and private, paternal. Vulnerability humanizes him, it does not weaken him. The show juxtaposes boardroom tactics with hospital corridors to interrogate how leadership translates across domains. The costs of revenge. Trang's revenge is logical in her mind but obscene in its implementation. The show calculates revenge as a currency that always devalues the person who spends it. Faith and medicine. The narrative frames recovery as an encounter between clinical care and prayer. The doctor who calls Deep's recovery almost unheard of speaks to the uneasy space where science and belief intersect. Ending notes and setup for what comes next. By episode's close, the family is intact, the villains exposed only in part, and the stakes higher than before. James has ordered an investigation, an administrative act that signals something more than revenge. It signals a commitment to justice. Trang, humiliated by her failure, grows more dangerous, not more clever, but more unchained. The arc promises that the next episodes will test the family's resilience further. Will the legal system catch up? Will the forensics link the poisoned fruit to Trang? Will her spiral produce further assaults on the family? The narrative has set a stage where love is the primary defense, but law and cunning are required to make that defense sustainable. A human story, with a caution. This episode succeeds because it treats ordinary domestic life as the site of both greatest risk and greatest redemption. It refuses to sentimentalize suffering and refuses, equally, to glamorize villainy. The family's victory is real but precarious. The villain's hatred is real but ultimately self-destructive. In that balance, the episode offers a simple civic lesson. That trust requires accountability, that love requires vigilance, and that compassion is a fragile, fighting thing.